Incredible moment! Cowboy discovers widow and kids eating leftovers, urgently brings them home. Jake Thompson parked his dusty truck outside the old diner, a relic barely clinging to life in the blistering West Texas heat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering with uncertainty, projecting a warped glow that felt all too familiar. He pushed the door open, the rusty hinges squeaking under the weight of the world, and stepped inside, his boots stirring the dust of a forgotten past. The clang of an empty plate against metal jolted him. In a corner booth, he saw her, Clara. A weary single mother, her eyes haunted but unyielding, sharing a single plate of leftover food with her two small children, faces gaunt from hunger. An unexpected pang shot through him as he observed them, and all at once he was struck by an overwhelming sense of urgency to act. He wanted to help, to make their burden lighter, yet a swirl of apprehension gripped him. He approached the table, but the wariness in Clara's gaze told him that she was no stranger to hardship. Even kindness could feel like a threat to someone who'd been let down. The thought of his past failures gnawed at him. Here he stood, rugged and reliable, and yet doubt whispered in his ear. What if she views your offer as pity? This conflict of intentions made his heart race. Could he genuinely reach out without imposing? He opened his mouth, words trembling. "Ma'am, I'd like to buy you and the kids a decent meal." His sincerity hung in the air like an unspoken prayer. But Clara's flinch caught him off guard. "No, thank you," she replied, her voice resolute, her pride like thick leather. It hurt to see her struggle silently against desperation, and he wondered if she sensed his loneliness too. Here he was, a rugged cowboy aching for connection, while she was a widow weathering her own storm. Still, Jake felt the need to offer support, but how could he do so without stepping on her dignity? Before the tension coiled too tightly around his heart, a thought flickered through his mind. This could be a chance to forge a bond, to address her silent battle head-on, yet fear wrapped around him like barbed wire. Was it not foolish to believe that he could bridge the chasm of her despair? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Yet, just as Jake turned to step back, Clara was at a crossroads as her financial woes spiraled deeper. The moment grew heavier with every breath, and the realization struck him. If he didn't act now, he could lose the chance to solidify any form of connection. Tension twisted in his gut, one question reverberating loudly within. How could he balance the line between inflicting help and respecting her pride? Fear tangled with determination as he thought of family, his own broken one, and questioned whether he had the strength to face not just Clara's past, but his own. "Please," he started again, voice thick with emotion. And at that moment they both stood vulnerable, grappling with their shared struggles. Could compassion break through the walls they had both raised? It felt like a precarious gamble, but Jake sensed another stake in the game. The fear of being left alone again, of letting the opportunity slip away into the dust of another sunset. Clara's gaze softened, and the weight of what lay ahead loomed large, leaving them at the brink of a decision, one that could either lead to healing or heartbreak. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope ready to snap. Jake's heart thudded against the walls of his chest as he struggled to find the words that could both uplift and reassure Clara. Staring into her weary eyes, he felt the urgency of his instinctive need to help. But how could he breach the fortress she had built around herself? "Clara," he began, grounding his voice with sincerity, "I see the weight you carry. I know it can be hard to accept help, but I don't want you to feel alone in this." The moment hung, punctuated only by the soft giggles of Clara's children as they played with their food, lingering in a world devoid of adult worries. Jake sensed the pull of her struggle. His own upbringing had taught him the value of pride and resilience, but he also understood the necessity of occasional surrender. In many ways, they mirrored one another, frayed edges around strong cores, each trying to navigate their own form of solitude. "Trust me," he implored after a brief pause. "It's okay to let someone in. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to offer a bit of kindness." As he spoke, something shifted within him. The hesitation that had held him captive began to dissolve. He was not merely a cowboy defined by his past. He was a man capable of change, of forging real connections born out of compassion. This thought sparked a flame of determination deep inside, revealing a hidden resolve that he had failed to recognize until this moment. Clara's brow furrowed, wrestling with her thoughts. The vulnerability this meeting had summoned felt foreign, unsettling. Jake could almost see her weighing trust against fear, pride against survival. It was a crucible of choice, a painful rebirth cloaked in uncertainty. Just then, one of her children, a little boy with shaggy hair that framed his sunken cheeks, looked up at his mother with wide eyes, innocence etched in every feature. "Mommy, I'm hungry." He didn't understand the weight of their predicament, but echoed a truth felt deeply by them all. Jake's heart wrenched in response. A flicker of awareness ignited in him, a realization of responsibility, not just for himself, but for others encapsulated in this small family. He straightened his shoulders, embodying the strength he was beginning to discover within himself. "Let me take you all out for dinner. Not as a handout, but as a meal you deserve, one you didn't have to scrape for." This time, he reached into his pocket, producing cash with surprising confidence. Clara's eyes widened, and he saw that shield begin to flicker. "Please, let me show you that the kindness of strangers can still exist." The tremor in his voice reflected his desperation, yet determination flowed through him like hot blood. She needed to know that it was okay to give and receive without shame. Clara's breath hitched, uncertainty spearing into her core. She looked at her children. Her decisions were not just hers to make anymore. And Jake, he stood there, firm, prepared to rival the storms of their pasts in a quest for something more meaningful, more enduring. After what felt like hours, a subtle change flickered in Clara's expression. She was softening. "Okay," she murmured, a fragile admission laced with caution, yet threaded with hope. Jake felt a rush, a mixture of relief and excitement. The ice between them had begun to crack. He extended his hand, inviting her into a partnership forged in vulnerability. And as Clara grasped it, they both felt the tethering of two souls navigating through adversity towards something untouched. But the journey was far from over. Jake knew that would require more than just this meal to bridge the gap created by their burdens. What lay ahead remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were stepping into uncharted territory together, summoning the courage to face the demons of their pasts. As they exited the diner, a gust of wind accompanied them, a prelude to the storms of self-discovery looming on the horizon. Little did they know that shadows from the past would soon arise, testing the strength of their newfound bond. But they would have to confront it head-on if they ever hoped to move forward. The air was filled with a crispness that hinted at a coming storm as Jake and Clara made their way down the street. The daylight waned, casting long shadows that stretched dramatically with every step. Clara's children chattered excitedly behind them, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that flowed between their mother and Jake. While he could sense her lingering hesitation, Jake felt something transformative emerging within him. It was not just a resolve to help Clara. It was a slow-burning desire to confront his own fears of vulnerability. "Do you mind if we stop by the park for a bit?" Jake asked, glancing back at the children, who were now chasing each other in fits of laughter. The joy in their sprite-like movements pulled at something deep inside him, a reminder of simpler times before the weight of responsibility fractured his world. "Just for a few minutes," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper, but he could see the flicker of relief in her eyes. He hadn't expected her to agree so readily, but perhaps she too needed a moment to breathe, away from the constraints of their conversation. As they entered the park, the scene blossomed, swings creaking gently, children darting about like fireflies, and the echoes of familial laughter nudging at Jake's heart. He watched as Clara settled on a bench, her shoulders releasing tension as she observed the chaotic beauty of the scene before her. He took a seat beside her, the distance between them seemingly evaporating as they both absorbed the atmosphere. "You know," he began, searching for the right words, "I used to think the world revolved around survival, but spending time with my family opened my eyes. Moments of connection, the laughter, the kindness, those are what keep us grounded. They make the hard parts worth it." Clara turned to him, a contemplative expression crossing her face. "It's not easy to believe that, especially when you feel like you've been holding everything together on your own," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I get that," he replied, the words tumbling out before his brain could catch up. "Growing up, I learned to fend for myself, too. But somewhere along the way, I grasped that leaning on others doesn't equate to weakness. It's a strength." A lingering silence formed, pregnant with the gravity of his admission. Jake was surprised at how easily he shared parts of himself that he'd usually kept buried. Speaking felt liberating, yet anxiety licked at his edges. Had he just exposed too much? Clara's gaze shifted to the horizon, her thoughts drifting far from the present. "My husband, he wouldn't have wanted this for us," she murmured, a tremor dancing at the back of her voice. "He wanted me to be strong, to push through, no matter how hard it got." Jake could feel in his bones the weight of that expectation, a haunting reflection of his experience. But what if pushing through means realizing you also need support? He leaned in a fraction closer, searching for her eyes, wanting her to connect with that fleeting sense of possibility. Sometimes what we build alone can't compare to what we create with others. Do you think he would deny you that? Clara faltered, as if his words had cracked open a door she had long shut. He could see the gears turning in her mind, the battle between pride and necessity raging within her. "Maybe, but allowing myself to lean on you, it's terrifying. What if I end up disappointing you?" she finally said, vulnerability spilling forth as if it had been pent up for too long. Jake felt a pang of recognition at her struggle. He realized that her fear resonated with his own, a mutual acknowledgment of uncertainty that he had grappled with his entire life. "Clara, we're all a little broken, but it's how we piece ourselves together that matters. I may not have all the answers," he said, his voice steady with conviction, "but I'm willing to try if you are. Just know you don't have to fight the darkness alone." A moment weighed heavily in the crisp evening air, the last light of day fading, leaving them with shadows enveloping their hopes. Jake could sense that a pivotal decision was looming, one that could either anchor or juggle their fragile connection. As he held his breath, he wondered if she would take that leap with him. "Okay," she finally breathed, glancing into the depths of his eyes. "Let's see what we can build together." But just as hope sparked between them, a raucous shout rang out from the park's edge, piercing through their moment of intimacy. Clara's children froze, confusion etched into their features. A group of unfamiliar youths was approaching, their boisterous energy mingling with an undercurrent of tension, igniting the air with uncertainty. Jake's heart raced,
The bond they had just begun to forge would soon be tested, thrust into the eye of the storm. But he couldn't falter now. The stakes had been raised, and he had yet to confront the very real, intimidating shadows of his own past, for Clara's sake and his own. As the group closed in, Jake's mind raced with a growing sense of urgency. The time had come to face the cracks in his own resilience. Little did he know, this confrontation would unravel secrets lurking just beneath his skin, threatening everything he had started to build with Clara. Jake's breath quickened as the group of youths approached, their laughter jarring against the backdrop of the serene park. He could sense the shift in Clara. A wave of anxiety rippled through her, the light in her eyes dimming as she shifted her weight. He instinctively moved to shield her and the children, but his body also froze in tension, unwilling to escalate an already fraught encounter. The teenagers, loud but not immediately threatening, congregated near the swings. They were bursting with a mix of youthful bravado and uncertainty, too cocky to realize the disruption they could inspire. Jake's instincts kicked in. He needed to be assertive, not just for Clara's sake, but to reclaim his own sense of control. "Hey," he called, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Can you keep it down a bit?" One of the teens, a tall boy with a messy shock of hair, turned towards him, surprise flickering across his face. There was a split second where Jake felt exposed, a remnant of his past bubbling to the surface. But as he locked eyes with the boy, he felt a twinge of recognition, a reflection of his own teenage self, hungry for acceptance, yet teetering on the edge of recklessness. "Who cares? We aren't bothering anyone," the boy shot back, but Jake saw the uncertainty lingering beneath.
The bravado. "Actually, you are," Jake replied, maintaining his composure despite the unease fluttering within him. "There are kids around. Show some respect." The words felt unfamiliar coming from his lips, but also exhilarating, an assertion of his boundaries. The response from the group was instant. Clara's children had shuffled closer to her, peering up at Jake with wide eyes filled with a mix of admiration and concern. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their gaze, realizing he had stepped into a role of protector, something he had long avoided. "Yeah, whatever," said another boy, rolling his eyes but stepping back slightly. The words hung in the air, a challenge, but their intensity was waning. The group simmered down, clearly factoring in Jake's unyielding gaze as a subtle warning, a strength he hadn't anticipated discovering within himself. Clara's hand found his, a small squeeze that ignited a spark of warmth amid the tension. It was a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone in this moment. He turned towards her, and their eyes locked, temporarily shielding them from the chaos swirling around. "Are you okay?" he asked, the concern bleeding through his voice. "I will be," she replied, her subtle shift in confidence evident. "You were brave." The word hung between them, a lifeline that could anchor their fragile connection. As the pressure in the air finally dissipated, the youths began to disperse, their earlier bravado faltering as the threat of confrontation faded. Jake could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, but alongside it came an unexpected clarity. "You handled that well," Clara commented as she watched the teenagers retreat, her tone almost reverent. "I didn't really think about it. I just acted," Jake admitted, surprised at his instinctive reaction. "It's just part of who I want to be now." "But you've barely known me," Clara remarked, her voice tinged with disbelief and curiosity. "How could you stand up for us like that?" "Because I know what it's like to feel powerless, and I've had enough of that in my life," he confessed, the sincerity in his voice resonating with an intensity that made his heart thud. "I won't let that happen again." As the children resumed their play, Clara watched her kids, the quiet grace of her features revealing a flicker of hope. It was fragile, yet it sparkled with potential. Jake felt that same hope blooming within him, a quiet revolution against his lifelong struggles with fear and uncertainty.
Perhaps this is what he didn't want for you, Jake said, thoughtfully considering her previous words. Pushing through doesn't mean you can't stand tall against challenges, especially when you choose who to lean on. Clara's eyes found his, her expression shifting from doubt to possibility. "Maybe we can figure this out together," she replied, each word alive with intention. Jake felt an exhilarating hum in the silence between them, the weight of their unspoken commitment settling in. Yet in that palpable moment of connection, the distant sounds of the park faded, replaced.
The evening air grew thick with uncertainty again, prickling the nape of his neck. He glanced over his shoulder, a sense of foreboding creeping into his thoughts. Just then he spotted movement, the same group of teenagers returning, but this time with a more menacing hue. Jake's heart pounded. The truth settled within him like a leaden weight. His moment of reckoning was approaching swiftly. What more could unravel tonight, he wondered, readying himself to confront whatever shadows lay beneath the surface. Jake's muscles tightened as the group of teens loomed larger, their earlier retreat now seeming more like a ploy than an exit. He could feel Clara's hand tighten around his, her focus drifting toward her children, concern etched on her face. The air was heavy with the fraught balance between fear and resolve. "Stay close to me," he murmured to her, his voice low, determined. The words weren't just for Clara. They were a mantra, a promise to himself. He had acted once, and now he needed to ensure that his newfound courage didn't wane. The teens swaggered back, their laughter now laced with a sharper edge, and Jake couldn't ignore the adrenaline surging through him. This was not just a challenge to protect Clara and the kids. It was a test of his resolve to redefine his identity as someone who could stand tall in the face of adversity. "Hey," he called out again, his tone firmer but not hostile. "What do you want?" The tall boy flipped his messy hair, stepping forward. "Just wanted to see if the hero here is as tough as he pretends," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Jake felt the heat rise within him, a boiling mix of past humiliations and present defiance. "I'm not pretending," he shot back, surprising even himself. The words tasted unfamiliar but empowering. Clara shifted beside him, her presence grounding him. They were connected in this standoff, and that realization ignited another spark of determination. He could feel Clara's gaze, filled with unspoken support. "Back off," Jake continued, forcing a steady breath as he stepped slightly forward, deliberately invading their space with confidence. "You're not impressing anyone here." The group paused, an electric silence swirling around them. Jake scanned their expressions, looking for the cracks in their bravado. Instead, he found a glimpse of vulnerability in the tall boy's eyes as uncertainty flickered across his face, stirring something within Jake. The fleeting recognition urged him to explore a different approach. Why not draw from his own experiences instead of purely confronting them? "Look," Jake began, lowering his voice to make it more personal. "I know what it's like to feel lost. It's not fun to act tough when you're scared inside. But if you want to prove something, why not stand up for something worth fighting for instead?
A thunderous silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant sound of children laughing. For the first time, Jake saw more than defiance in theirs.
Eyes. There was contemplation, perhaps even curiosity. Before the tension could snap back into aggression, the taller boy tilted his head, a twig of confusion flickering in his expression. "What do you know about being scared?" he challenged, but the edge had dulled. There was a glimmer of a challenge not yet fully formed. Jake seized the opening, confronting his own fears as he spoke. "More than I'd like to admit. I haven't always had it together. But standing here, this is a new beginning for me. You can pick that too. It's a choice." Clara's grip loosened slightly, and in that moment Jake felt a rush of clarity. He wasn't just doing this for her, he was doing it for himself, embarking on a journey toward a more assertive version of Jake, an advocate for himself, for those he cared about, and maybe even for people he didn't know yet. The group shuffled uncomfortably. Jake watched as the tall boy, despite himself, seemed to reconsider his stance, glancing back at his friends. Jake's heartbeat thundered in his ears, filled with the thrill of uncertainty and the inkling of recognition. The possibility of transformation was tangible. The moment hung tantalizingly, but it was interrupted by a raucous shout, a volley of taunts shot from the edges of the park, a new wave of teenagers gathering, amplifying the existing threat. Jake's heart sank, knowing that he could no longer rely on dialogue alone. The tall boy and his gang turned to face the incoming hostility, hesitating as they weighed their options. Unbeknownst to them, Jake was doing the same. He could either back down, fold the courage he had just mustered, or seize upon what could be a decisive moment for both him and Clara. "Clara, stay with the kids," he barked, adrenaline piercing through his uncertainty. Without a glance back, he steeled himself, stepping forward, ready to confront the new challenge head on. What would he discover about himself when push came to shove? As he advanced, the questions rushed inside him. Could he truly relinquish his past fears? Was he ready to embrace a potentially transformative fight in defense of those who mattered? In that moment, Jake understood the stakes were higher than the confrontation itself. It was the reckoning of his own identity. And then, as he prepared for the collision that lay ahead, a thought flickered. The real fight might not just be about physical confrontation, but reclaiming his sense of self in a world that had often stripped him of it. Jake's heart raced as he moved forward, the air thick with tension and impending confrontation. The incoming group of teens, armed with taunts and bravado, surged like a wave crashing against his newfound resolve. Every step he took felt heavier, his muscles taut, not merely from fear of the impending chaos, but from the weight of personal transformation. This wasn't just about Clara and the kids anymore. It was about reclaiming the lost fragments of his identity. He wanted to believe.
He was stronger, but doubt tugged at him. What if this confrontation turned him back into the scared, submissive person he'd fought so hard to suppress? "Don't show weakness," he reminded himself, channeling the fierce determination that surged within him. Composite images of past failures played in his mind, moments of silence when he should have spoken up, instances when he let others dictate his worth. Not this time, he thought, pushing his fear aside as he formed a plan. The original group hesitated at Jake's bold stance, the tall boy mixing uncertainty with a flicker of respect. But the newcomers, loud and brash, didn't appear to share that sentiment. Closer now, Jake could see the differences in their expressions. Some were eager for conflict, others seemed doubtful. This duality sparked something in him, a notion that perhaps not everyone was set on confrontation. Maybe there was a way to turn this moment around. "Listen," Jake shouted, addressing the incoming teens. "You want to impress someone? Then don't waste your time on pointless fighting. Stand back and be better than this." The words left his mouth before he could second-guess them, surprising even himself. The reaction was a palpable hush, the group of teens momentarily taken aback. It was a strange vulnerability to have so many eyes trained on him, yet he realized he felt liberated, at least for this fleeting moment. This doesn't have to end in violence. There are better ways to find respect, Jake pressed on, venturing deeper into what felt like uncharted territory. He could hardly believe the conviction in his voice. You're proving nothing by pushing others around. Use your time to lift others instead of tearing them down. As he spoke, Jake recognized a shifting energy, a possibility brewing among the lofty tensions. The tall boy from earlier exchanged glances with his friends, processing Jake's words. "Maybe you're right," one of the newcomers muttered, his voice filtered through skepticism. A flicker of hope ignited in Jake. Was this a moment of potential connection? But before he could capitalize on it, the original group shifted, fueled by discomfort. One boy, agitated by Jake's defiance, squared his shoulders and stepped forward. The air crackled with tension, and Jake braced for an inevitable escalation. "Shut up, man. You don't know anything about respect." The defiance in that voice sent a bolt of determination straight to Jake's core. He refused to let the moment collapse into chaos. "I may not know everything, but I know this," he declared, his heart racing. "Respect comes from standing up, not tearing others down. If you want to fight, fight against what holds you back. Show you're better than just a bully." The ensemble of teens reflected a myriad of emotions. Some bristled, others felt the weight of doubt. Jake's pulse thrummed in his ears, each word deployed with the intent to bridge their fractures rather than deepen them. And then it clicked. This wasn't just about him. It was about them, too. Each of these kids
had their own battles, whether they admitted it or not. Jake saw it, felt beneath their bravado, glimpses of the same lost yearning he battled against. "Are you really willing to stand together for something worth defending?" he challenged, stepping closer, the adrenaline throwing off warnings about proximity. The tall boy stepped back, jaw clenched, wrestling with the complexities within himself. Jake's thoughts raced. Would they see their own struggles mirrored in him? Could this moment be about more than just defiance? It could be healing for all of them. Suddenly, from behind, a voice called out, "Jake! Clara!" It was a high-pitched cry, sharp and urgent, stirring the air charged with tension. Jake whipped around. The children were emerging from the nearby area, their faces uncertain but curious. "Stay back!" Jake shouted, his heart leaping at the renewed urgency. In that instant, the fragile potential for understanding shattered. Distracted, Jake's keen focus faltered. The incoming group registered the tension and seemed to consider their options anew, fueled by a mix of bravado and trepidation, further emboldened by the unexpected arrival of innocent onlookers. How far will he go? The tall boy wondered, glancing at Jake with a conflicted gaze. Jake squared his shoulders. The stakes had increased. It was no longer just some boys squaring off. Clara's wide eyes reflected fear and uncertainty, but more importantly, they bore hope. His determination surged again, igniting clarity. But what represented the best course this time? Would it be through words or direct action? The tightrope between peace and confrontation felt impossibly thin. "Let's figure this out together," Jake stated, hoping for a collective answer as he looked from the children to the teens. He would stand firm in the face of whatever unfolded next. The moment of truth was unfolding rapidly, but questions lingered about whether he could truly lead. Would he challenge the very essence of who he'd been molded to be next? And then it hit him like a wave. The recounting of his own identity began in earnest. The children stood frozen, their innocent faces a stark contrast to the provocative air thickening around them. Jake felt their gaze resting on him, an added weight to his own growing uncertainty.
Clara's bright eyes searched for reassurance, pulling him back to his purpose. This was about more than himself now. Jake felt the need to maintain momentum, his earlier resolve pulsating through him. "Everyone has a choice," he called out, voice steadier this time. "We can keep this cycle going, or we can break it right here." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd of teens. The newcomers huddled together, exchanging skeptical glances. Some seemed to consider his words. Others looked increasingly uneasy. It was an opportunity, but Jake sensed that each second counted. "Listen," he pressed on, taking a cautious step forward, leaving behind the instinct to retreat. "If you're trying to impress anyone, it should be yourselves. Show who you really are, not who you think you have to be.
You're worth more than what this moment is asking of you." At that moment, he saw the tall boy squint, grappling with the challenge laid before him. Doubt flickered in his eyes, and Jake could feel the tension thickening beneath the surface, a magnetic pull that swayed the group's opinion. "Do you really think we're all just bullies?" the tall boy finally spoke, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. The challenge was palpable, a second kindling for conflict or resolution. "I know there's more to you than that," Jake responded, focus sharpening. "Just like I had to discover there was more to me. You have potential, even if it's buried under fear of rejection or the desire to fit in. But standing back while others get pushed around, that doesn't define you." The words carried weight, heavy and charged. He could see minds shifting, walls cracking. The rawness of vulnerability began to ripple, a powerful undercurrent that could ignite connection. Jake felt the fragments of his own identity stirring. Maybe he could help others grapple with theirs. Yet, before the tension settled, a laugh erupted from one of the original group, a cruel, mocking sound that cut through the possibility like a knife. "What a joke! One dude thinks he can change everyone here with his words." Jake locked onto him, a knot tightening in his stomach. Doubt threatened to invade, but he didn't let it have any power. Instead, he squared his shoulders and let a moment of silence hang, gathering his thoughts, channeling the emotions that surged through him. "Words matter," he responded, his voice low but steady. "They can build people up or tear them down. What you choose matters. That's where real strength comes from." The direct challenge, stark and unwavering, lingered in the air. Jake narrowed the distance between himself and the taunting group, fueled by an authority that felt foreign yet exhilarating. He was ready to confront any backlash. He needed to. "Is that really what you want?" he asked calmly, voice firm. "To be the punchline or the power behind a good story? You can laugh now, but what happens when it's your turn to be laughed at?" The energy shifted. Jake could sense the group recalibrating, influenced by a deeper line of questioning. An urge to dive deeper into the power dynamics in play tugged at him. Perhaps this wasn't just about standing against bullies, but understanding why they behaved so defensively to begin with. "Here's the truth," Jake continued, curiosity now mixed with conviction. "You don't want to feel weak. None of us do. But pretending to be stronger through power over others only makes you feel smaller inside. Wouldn't you rather rise together?" Clara's eyes sparkled with a mix of admiration and fear. She was watching him take the step he'd been waiting for. But Jake knew this moment teetered on the precipice of action. Would his words be enough to shift the tide completely, or would he need to confront the ringleader head-on? He took a deep breath, scanning the tensions in the group. The tall boy finally stepped forward, brow furrowed in contemplation. "Maybe we don't need to fight," he admitted, his voice quieter, weighed down by the unspoken burdens of their realities. Jake's heart raced, but a new determination ignited within him. This moment could break barriers if he chose to guide it.
"Then let's talk," Jake offered, energy fluctuating between optimism and a latent potential for conflict. "We can figure this out together, or we can continue this cycle of pain. What's it gonna be?" Just then, the defiant boy who had laughed earlier stepped back, eyes narrowed in realization, uncertain of his place in the shifting dynamic. Was this confrontation unraveling in a way he had not anticipated? Jake paused, steeling himself for whatever might come next, acutely aware not just of his own development, but of the collective progress waiting to unfold. Could this shift really take hold, or would he have to stand firm in a final confrontation to protect not only Clara, but also the possibility of change? "Let's see who's really willing to step up," he thought, feeling the edge of a new challenge forming on the horizon. The tall boy's hesitant step wore the weight of years spent in the shadows. But Jake felt the shifting dynamics, the palpable tension hanging in the air like a coiled spring. This was a crucial moment, one that called for his complete presence and composure. He was ready to lead, yet the question loomed: did he possess the strength to foster genuine change? Jake could see small cracks forming in the hardened exterior of the boys around him. But beneath the uncertainty, he could also sense a deeper fear. This was more than a conflict over physical power. It was a battle over dignity, acceptance, and hidden vulnerabilities. It fascinated him, this raw intersection of humanity, and he found himself stepping deeper into the void of discomfort. "Look, I don't need to be a hero or something," Jake began, measuring his tone to nudge their defensiveness. "But I'm tired of feeling like I have to hide who I really am. It's exhausting. So why should you have to? Why should anyone? Let's change the narrative together." He watched closely for reactions as he spoke, desperate to convey the gravity of what he was suggesting. The tall boy's brow furrowed in thought, his black and gray hoodie seeming heavy with the baggage of expectation. Jake realized that dialogue held more power than confrontation. Words could resonate, laying the foundation for understanding. "Maybe," the tall boy said finally, glancing to the others with uncertainty. "But how do we even start?" A surge of hope welled up inside Jake. This was the opening he'd been waiting for. "By talking about it," he urged, heart racing with possibility. "By recognizing that pushing down our feelings never leads anywhere good. Let's unpack that. Start with a small step, like
asking each other what we really want." The laughter of the boy who had mocked him earlier faded into murmurs of confusion and inquisitiveness. Jake seized the moment, meeting the defiant boy's eye with unwavering resolve. "Will you dare to show us your real selves? Let's see what's underneath all that bravado." "What if we do?" the defiant boy countered, not without a hint of defiance. "What if we do and just make it worse?" "Or," Jake responded, a thin smile forming, "we might find a whole new perspective. You're not just what others label you. You're more. You're not alone. We're all figuring it out." Jake felt the weight lift slightly as discussion stirred within the group. Clara moved closer, her faith in him a blanket of warmth that inspired strength. Her presence whispered encouragement, reminding him of their shared vulnerability. The tall boy glanced around, revealing a subtle transformation bubbling beneath the surface. A flicker of understanding crossed his face, perhaps contemplating the notion that they'd spent too long avoiding their truths. "I guess if I can be honest, yeah, I don't want to feel ashamed anymore either. It's tiring pretending to be someone I'm not." Jake's pulse quickened at this moment of authenticity. It felt like they were on the brink of something monumental, pushing past thresholds that usually kept them apart. "Then let's share," he encouraged, voice unwavering, bathed in a newfound conviction. "Every story counts. Let's unravel it together." As voices began to rise, mingling with emotions previously repressed, Jake became acutely aware that this could be a turning point, not just for the group around him, but for himself as well. He was casting off layers of self-doubt, embracing his voice, even as those once distant connections felt closer than ever. But even amidst this burgeoning camaraderie, remnants of conflict brewed beneath the surface. With that defiant boy watching closely, unresolved tensions lurked like uninvited shadows, threatening to seep back into their testimonies of honesty. Could they truly break the cycle of pain through this moment of revelation, or were they teetering at the edge of deeper discord? Jake knew they had only begun to scratch the surface, and the stakes felt impossibly high. Just as laughter replaced the tension and bonds began to form, a familiar figure lurked outside their newly opened circle. The ringleader of resistance from earlier, glaring with disdain and disbelief, stepped forward. Jake felt the room shift, tension tightening once again. The time had come to face the unyielding opposition. Jake's heart sank as he recognized the familiar sneer of the ringleader, a boy named Tommy who thrived on disruption and hostility. The atmosphere dripped with foreboding, tension creeping back like the chill of an approaching storm. He could feel all eyes shift in Tommy's direction, a haunting reminder of the intimidation that had colored their previous encounters. "Look who decided to play hero," Tommy called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm, as he stepped into their makeshift circle. Jake felt the room shift, tension tightening once again. The time had come to face the unyielding opposition. Jake's heart sank as he recognized the familiar sneer of the ringleader, a boy named Tommy who thrived on disruption and hostility. The atmosphere dripped with foreboding, tension creeping back like the chill of an approaching storm. He could feel all eyes shift in Tommy's direction, a haunting reminder of the intimidation that had colored their previous encounters. "Look who decided to play hero," Tommy called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm, as he stepped into their makeshift circle. "You really think a few shared feelings are going to change anything? You're just a bunch of losers trying to find purpose." Jake clenched his fists, fighting the urge to react with anger. Instead, he took a deep breath, letting the air center him. He understood the fear that fueled Tommy's disdain. Fear of being exposed, of losing control. It was time to stand his ground without being swept into the cycle of aggression. "Tommy," Jake began, his voice calm yet firm, "we're not here to prove anything to you. We're just trying to support each other." Even as he spoke, doubts flickered through his mind. Would this approach hold? Was deepening their conversation worth sparking more hostility? With each word, he felt something inside him shatter, the need for approval, the fear of rejection. Here, in the presence of uncertainty and judgment, Jake had found a kernel of strength rooted in authenticity. It was no longer just about him, but about everyone in the circle who was choosing vulnerability over bravado. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Tommy sneered, taking a step closer, his eyes searching for weakness. "You think just because you show a little emotion, everyone suddenly respects you? You'll always be the weak one in the room." A tumult of tension erupted within Jake. Hadn't he just started building bridges? Why did this moment threaten to shatter everything? He glanced around the circle, seeking reassurance in the faces of the boys who had tentatively leaned into openness. Clara watched, her presence grounding him, reminding him why he had initiated this dialogue in the first place. "Maybe being weak is not about what you think it is," Jake replied, his voice growing steadier. "It takes more guts to expose your fears than to hide behind insults. Why does it scare you so much to talk and listen?" He could see the puzzled expressions on the faces around him, the awareness that perhaps Tommy's bravado masked something deeper, a longing for connection that he refused to admit. "What's the real reason you're here, Tommy?" Jake pressed. "Are you afraid of being left behind while we figure out who we really are?" The challenge hung in the air, almost palpable. Jake awaited Tommy's response, knowing it could redefine the dynamics of their interaction. Tommy hesitated, a flicker of something almost vulnerable crossing his guarded facade. Was it shame? Regret? Instead of pressing further, Jake took a small step back, a gesture of invitation rather than confrontation. "This isn't the end of the conversation, Tommy. You can choose to be part of this or not, but we're moving forward. You don't have to hide from us." For a moment, Tommy's confident posture faltered, revealing the inner turmoil that Jake had almost suspected. But just as quickly, he straightened, an angry mask pulling back into place. "You think you can just change everything with words? I'll show you how wrong you are." Jake felt the air thicken with the unspoken battle of wills as Tommy turned and stalked away, leaving simmering tension hanging in the air. This was the most direct confrontation he had ever faced. It shook him. But instead of disappointment, he felt a steely determination crystallizing within him. This wasn't just about fear and anger. It was about holding space for those who feared being seen. Through the chaos, Jake's heart hardened around a new resolve. He couldn't allow himself to waver. Mentorship depended on clarity, leading even when faced with contempt. He had to remain a beacon. As the other boys reluctantly returned to their shares, a lingering uncertainty loomed. Would the courage they had begun to forge withstand confrontation? And what would Tommy's next move be in this unraveling tapestry of self-discovery? Jake understood this was more than just a pivotal moment. It felt like the opening act of a far larger story. The real question simmered in his mind. How far would he be willing to go to maintain the peace he sought to cultivate? The answer awaited just beyond the edges of their fragile circle, shrouded in the shadows of unresolved challenges. Jake stood in the aftermath of the confrontation, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through him. The shadows of doubt danced at the edges of his psyche, yet he understood this moment was pivotal, not just for him, but for Clara, her children, and perhaps even Tommy and the others. In the silence that followed Tommy's exit, the atmosphere began to shimmer with the tentative hope of possibility. Jake took a deep breath, drawing strength from the gathering clouds above. Feeling the weight of their shared struggles reframe his perspective. "We all have mountains to climb," he began, his voice emanating a steady rhythm that echoed in the hearts around him. "But facing them together makes the ascent less daunting." Clara's eyes, shining with admiration, provided an anchor. He was not merely speaking to the boys in front of him. He was articulating his own journey towards growth, bridging the chasms of doubt that had long held him prisoner. The tall boy nodded, a flicker of encouragement igniting as the tension from earlier seemed to fade. "Yeah, maybe we can change up things for real," he said, glancing at his friends, who were now more receptive than before. The groups that had once stood in opposition now began to harmonize, united by the simple act of vulnerability. This feeling of warmth began to expand, wrapping around Jake like a reassuring cloak, urging him forward. "It's about all of us," he affirmed, "and how we choose to support one another. I'm just as scared as any of you. We all want to feel we belong." His words fell like seeds into waiting soil, and he sensed the ground beneath them shifting. Perhaps they were all craving this connection more than they had realized. With newfound resolve, Jake continued, "Let's talk about what we can build from here. What's holding us back from becoming who we truly want to be?" Each question he posed took root in the growing camaraderie that melted the barriers between them. In that moment, Clara leaned closer, her trust empowering him. It radiated through their circle, ricocheting off the walls of their insecurities. The boys began to share, ignited by a bond forged in honesty. Words poured out, not as mere utterances, but as affirmations of their humanity.
"I just want to be understood," admitted one boy, his tough exterior peeling back to reveal vulnerability. "Everybody thinks they know me, but no one really sees." Jake offered a nod of understanding, urging the circle to embrace this new energy. That's where it starts. No one's alone in this. As emotions tangled and woven between shared narratives, the sun dipped below the horizon, a tangible acknowledgement that their transformation was well underway, moving beneath the surface of their lives like an undercurrent. Within their exchanges, Jake felt a shift within himself. The path he was now pursuing felt clearer, his own doubts transforming into resolute affirmations. He wasn't just a solitary cowboy grappling with his identity. He was a leader, a guide, creating connections that fostered collective strength. Shallow breaths of uncertainty matched the rhythm of the fading light, but he held firm against the pull of fear. He was ready to break down the barriers, not just for himself, but for Clara and her children. They too deserved this chance to reshape their narratives. "I realize now that helping doesn't diminish my strength, it actually amplifies it," he said, his voice both strong and steady. "We're forging our paths together. Let's keep moving forward." With those words, Clara squeezed his hand, gratitude sparkling in her gaze. They were both stepping out from the shadows of their pasts, finding a shared future carved from the pieces of their fragmented lives. As laughter broke out among the boys, stark against the earlier struggle, Jake allowed himself a moment of pride. The challenge Tommy posed was far from over, but they were no longer battling alone. They were stepping into a new light, emboldened by this experience. The night air grew cooler, ushering in a new chapter, a push towards authentic connections, rising from vulnerability and courage. Remembering the tumultuous path they had just traversed, Jake rallied the group. "Let's keep this spirit alive. We can become who we are meant to be and support one another. Together, we'll conquer whatever comes next." The boys erupted into cheers, the tension transforming into elation as Jake felt an authentic assurance swell against his heart. This was the moment in which he'd seized control of his narrative, and in doing so, he'd transformed not only himself, but those around him. With Clara and her children nestled against him, he realized they were all redefining what it meant to stand tall in vulnerability. He understood that this was not merely an ending, it was the beginning of shaping a future built on resilience and support, a profound testament to the strength found in unity, reaffirming, "We will not face
our challenges alone." Now Jake found himself more than just a cowboy. He had become an architect of connection, ready to confront whatever storms lay ahead, equipped with courage hardened in the fires of their bonds. Don't wait another second. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories and be part of this transformation journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show that you're invested in these incredible tales. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and witness the power of connection and courage. This is the moment to show your support.